How to find healing after grief and loss. Welcome back to the Path to Purpose podcast with Dr. Katja Rusanen. In today's episode, we are exploring how to build resilience and bounce back from grief and loss, offering insights to help you live your purpose. And I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Carrie Hopkins-Doubts, who is a spiritual resilience coach, working with men and women experiencing major life transitions, whether it be in relationships, career, health, or spirituality. As the founder of Life's Next Chapter Coaching, Carrie's passion is helping people consciously rebuild their lives after loss by guiding them to reconnect with their heart, reclaim their power, and realign with their purpose to create their life's next chapter. So, welcome, Carrie. I'm super excited to have you here.
Thank you, Katya. It's wonderful to be here with you.
And as we are getting started, I am always curious how you ended up doing the work that you do. So
Mhm.
was there a special event that led you to this path?
Well, you know how life is. You follow the breadcrumbs sometimes, of the path, and it reveals itself while you're on it. So, as you know, I was part of the faculty and the staff at the University of Santa Monica for many years before they ended up having to close their degree programs. And while we were in the process of completing all of that, I um, had started my career as a coach. I'd got some training from USM to become a marriage and family therapist, and really found that that really wasn't the path that resonated for me. So I got into coaching. And as I was completing my coach training, they helped us create specializations. And for that year, they offered a specialization in grief coaching, which it just really called to me. It really spoke to me because of the USM training, I'd had a lot of experience in sitting with people going through really hard things and all of the emotional upheaval and turmoil that goes with that. And also at the same time, I lost my mother when I was in my coach training program, and that was a very difficult loss. She died suddenly, and it just really spoke to me to get the grief counseling certification as well. So I'm a certified grief counselor. And that was how I started my practice to focus on people who had lost something or someone really important to them. And so I've been doing this work for about 12, 13 years now. Um, I had also further experiences in that I lost my husband about 3.5 years ago, and while doing the work. And it was really at that time where, in my own deep grief, I had the opportunity to kind of step back and sort of take my own program. And that and being coached by a really fantastic coach helped me to, just adapt to the loss of my husband and deepen more fully in my calling, my purpose to help people who are going through this really difficult time. So that's kind of a long answer to your question.
And thank you for sharing. And so sorry for your losses that you.
Thank you.
And it is something in life so many of us, one like sooner or later, are going through some sort of loss and
Mhm.
need to find a way to deal with that grief. And
Yeah.
it's been my own journey as well,
Mm.
to deal with grief and loss, one of the big lessons in my life. And one of the things as well, what I loved, and just want to highlight here, like that you took your own program, you had support, because that was one of my things. I was isolating myself. I didn't
Mm.
think that I deserve support as my boyfriend died by suicide. So I was taking
Mm.
that guilt on from
Mm.
that experience and felt I don't I don't deserve support. And nowadays I see the value of
Mhm.
having support. That's why I'm super advocate of support now, because it is
Yeah.
allowing yourself to be supported, because we are not meant to go through this journey alone.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I'm so sorry for your own loss. That kind of a loss that you're talking about is what we call complicated grief
Mm.
because of the feelings that many people have, especially when they've lost somebody to suicide. There's just a lot of compound feelings on top of just the loss. So I'm really glad to hear that you eventually did obviously get some help because here you are today, so
Yes.
yeah.
And University of Santa Monica was one of very eye-opening and healing journey for me. So
Mm,
I'm really
hmm.
glad that I found my way there, and you have
Yes.
also been involved, and you were actually
Hmm.
in the faculty when I studied there. So
Hmm.
it's
I remember you, yes.
and now one of the questions I often get as well when I talk about grief and loss is like the timeline, because
Mm,
sometimes people think that there is a timeline. How long does it take to bounce back from grief and loss? And there is certain expectation that you should be okay after a while. So, what is your opinion on this?
mm. Well, grief is an individualized experience. And so when people ask me that question, and believe me, they do, how long am I going to feel this way? And I don't really ever have a great answer for people. I do know that the research shows that if you just kind of wait and do nothing and just say, well, time will heal the wounds and I'll feel better soon, that kind of approach really can take a long time. The research is it can take anywhere from 5 to 8 years to recover, from a deep loss, if that's the approach that you take. Um, my sense is when I work with people, because they are actively, um, doing the work of healing, it takes less time because it's much more of a conscious process rather than, well, I'll just wait it out until I feel better. So unfortunately, I can't answer the question in how long it takes. Often I do hear people say, um, why does it take this long? I should be better. I should be over it by now. Everybody's saying, and especially with a loss like a divorce, something like that, people, oh, you should be over it. You're the one who wanted the divorce. And so that doesn't really help when people are telling you that like you've got a certain amount of time.
Mm.
Even in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Therapists, bereavement. They say if you're actively, bereaved in grief after 6 months, it can be coded as a mental health issue. So I don't. Grief is a natural response to loss, and depending on how complicated the loss was, how strong the relationship was, um, it just takes as long as it takes.
Yeah, I think that's a good. It takes as long as it takes. There is no timeline, and everybody's experience is very unique based on their
Hmm.
spiritual curriculum. I think that's why the comparison game, if we go like, oh,
Hmm.
they bounce back much sooner, I should be doing something different. What's wrong with me when I'm not
Yeah,
over this yet? So
right.
it's like having that compassion and kindness with yourself when you're on that journey. And it just takes the time it takes.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, it depends also on the relationship. We could have a member of a family die, and say it's the husband, right? Husband and father. Now the wife and the children are going to grieve the loss of this person, but they will do it differently. It's a different loss for the wife than it is for the children. And so sometimes people get confused by that because one person in the family doesn't seem to be grieving, right? But they're doing it their way. And so it's just important to give people grace and give people space, and not space as in isolating, but just that safe space to be exactly where they are in the process.
That is beautifully said, and allowing other people to have the space and doing the grieving in their way. That was a really good point you brought up. Let's talk about a little bit deeper on this because there is these differences. We grieve differently.
Hmm.
And what makes then some people more available for that post-traumatic growth than others if we kind of see the loss as some level of experience of trauma? So
Hmm.
then comes the post-traumatic growth that is available for all of us, but some might be more open to that than others. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question, and it's one that they're still doing a lot of research in today because for some people, they can go through a very traumatic event and a loss and come out on the other side of their grieving process, having, learned something, having gained something, having grown from the experience. Others don't, they really get stuck in the grieving process, and it can take them down. So, um, that is one of the things that really interested me. After the loss of my husband, I started looking at that very same question. What is it about me, perhaps, um, that I could help other people from based on my experience, um, to really embrace this loss, this very demanding and in a lot of cases very uh, terrible loss. And when we're ready, we can start to move into the idea that this didn't happen to me, it happened for me. And you have to be ready for that. You don't spring that on someone who is in the early process of grieving because they're just not ready for it. They're really in the pain and the trauma. And on the other side of healing, typically what happens is, to the extent that you really have completed the tasks of mourning and are able to recreate a life you love on the other side, it really does become a transformational process. And that is where we can claim it as post-traumatic growth.
Mhm.
So what makes some people more ready for that than others? I think it's a willingness, perhaps before this loss, to understand that they are much greater than the small self part of them, the ego, the part of us. We have available to us that knowing that we are a spiritual being having a human experience. And so I think that when people really have that kind of a context or a framework, it really does help them see that, yes, I'm having a very human experience of loss and grief and anger and regret and, all of the things that go with that. But deeply down, I am still okay inside me. I'm still who I am. I'm still a loving um, and resilient person. So, long answer to your question. I hope that got us there.
It's so fascinating for me too, because I always mirror things to my own journey. And I feel
Hmm.
like so many years I was focused on that suffering
Hmm.
and that story that life happened to me.
Hmm.
And then through the studies and through thanks to spiritual teachers, I started to see even the opening a little bit the door to a possibility that what if this happened for me?
That's right.
And it often requires the little bit higher perspective. I call it seeing it through the eyes of a soul, because
Hmm.
sometimes in our mind we might be so caught up
Yeah.
in the suffering, but if we see it like higher perspective and saying, okay, what did I learn through this experience? For me, it was learning loving.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped me then to like start seeing the growth that came
Mm.
after.
Yeah.
It is as well like checking where you are focusing on. Are you even
Mm-hmm.
seeing what came after? Because that was at least from my own journey. I
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
Yeah.
see it because I wasn't even looking. I was just focusing on the suffering of my story.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that. Believe me, it's when we're in pain, it really grabs our attention. And, what people tend to do when they're in pain is try to survive it, right? Try to push it aside, avoid it, dismiss it, distract ourselves from it because, yeah, it's very uncomfortable. And if we resist the temptation to do that and really trust ourselves to enter into the pain and to experience it and to feel it, to express it, and then release it, it does have a message for us. And it is part of that process of rebuilding your life after loss to have conversations with your grief, have invitation for these feelings to actually be present and accept them. Not easy to do without help.
No. So that's why the support is so
Hmm.
important for us to allow ourselves to have the support
Hmm.
as we are building that resilience. Because I know you talk about the spiritual resilience.
Hmm. Hmm.
So can you explain a little bit what that is so we are all on the same page?
Sure. Again, as I was, working through the grief of the loss of my husband, Tom, I started really thinking about what is it that really helps people create a life they love on the other side of this kind of a loss? And it is this belief that we are all naturally resilient. We have qualities that once we really tune into them. If you think about resilience and just the way it's defined in the dictionary, it is that elasticity, the ability to bounce back after adversity. I started seeing it instead of bouncing back because look, you don't go back to life the way it was. You're still missing that person. You can't say, "Oh, I'm back," but you can bounce forward. And so, bouncing forward, I looked at the four qualities that I think really helped people understand that no matter what you're going through, these qualities reside inside of you. The first one is capability. You are capable of living your life. When my husband died, he was the guy who took care of all of the house stuff, right? He was really good with his hands. He loved doing like maintenance things and also he was the guy who he was an audiophile. So all of our electronic equipment had these very fancy remotes. And, I started to feel a little helpless about just turning on the TV. It's like, come on, you you can do this. You can figure this out, right? Also, the finances, that was an area that he loved paying the bills and everything. And, I had to remember I'm fully capable of doing these things, of these skills and taking care of these responsibilities now that it's just me. So capability is one. Resourcefulness is another. If you don't know how to do something, you know how to find somebody who does. And that was the other area. I got an estate planner. Because Tom died so suddenly and we weren't prepared for that. I said, I'm not going to do that to my daughter. So I put everything I owned into a trust. I found handymen. I found people to help me do the things that Tom used to do. So there's capability, resourcefulness, there's creativity. Creativity is not just painting and writing and that kind of it's problem solving. It's coming up with a way that's unique to you, thinking outside the box. So we are capable, resourceful, creative, and we're whole. The wholeness was really the big step in owning that even though I feel brokenhearted, I felt, the feelings that, oh, I'm broken. And that was really not true because inside, as part of the growth was to expand in my compassion for myself and for others and to realize that we're all, you know, experiencing grief and loss in some way. And so we are all one, so that wholeness, that realization that in our spiritual nature we have all of these qualities and we can rely on them. They're fact-based. Okay, so that's what I mean by spiritual resilience, because the wholeness part of it and just the trust that something greater than us is holding us, is um, supporting us, is creating the us anew. It's like I was no longer a wife, so that identification, I had to empty myself a little bit to take on, well, I am still who I am. I'm still Carrie.
Love those examples that you shared because I think that's very helpful for others too. Like, because it is so easy to go to that place
Hmm.
where everything feels so overwhelming. You are dealing with the
Hmm.
grief, and then you have to deal with the everyday mundane things to keep the household running and figuring out new
Hmm.
ways how to do things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then be finding that spiritual resilience. Now we have a word for it that we
Yes.
can use. And then you also have mentioned the grief process. Like we all have our own journey with that.
Hmm.
But how do you know if someone has unresolved grief?
That's a great question. I have a client that came to me just with the awareness that she actually, most of my clients, well, now that I think back to it, they realize some part of them, they're stuck. They're not moving forward in an area that is really important to them, or they find themselves very reactive and sort of out of proportion with the event. So they can find themselves really just enraged at someone or something, and they don't really know why. So it's like they're leaking a lot of that emotional energy that they're not, processing through. So that's what I call unresolved grief. Um, it can happen that years later, another loss happens. So, for instance, you lose your husband, and you sort of, um, survive after that, but then you lose your dog, you have to, your dog dies. And then all of a sudden, all of the unprocessed emotion about losing your husband also comes out to play, you know? And so people go, why am I so upset over losing an animal? It's not that, it's like it's everything that got stirred up. So that's another way that I know that people have unresolved grief, is that, they're just, their emotional process just feels very overwhelming and out of proportion to what it is they're dealing with, or they're not moving forward in a way that they want to.
So now if somebody is like, that's me, raising their hand, like that really resonates. So
Yeah.
besides contacting you, of course, which I recommend, get support. So
Yes.
what would you recommend as the next step for those who have unresolved grief? What can they do?
Well, that's such a great question, because in all the instances of people who come forward to work with me, especially those who say, I lost somebody 8 years ago and I'm still not over it. It's that awareness. It's that, you know what, I don't feel like myself. I feel like I lost myself along the way here. I feel like I've lost that joy of living, and so we can take those baby steps into exploring, what's holding you back from experiencing your joy. Well, it's unprocessed sorrow. And so, if we have ourselves sort of locked up emotionally, we're not going to feel the pain as much, but we're not feeling also the joy and the happiness and the contentment and the peace and the loving that is also available to us. So, that's I think what I have to say on that. It's just being aware. I'm not fully living my life. And that's where I help people understand that there's a difference between just a passive grieving and suffering, like you were talking about, and a life-affirming grieving process, because it gives you your life back.
Yes, absolutely. And love the step that you shared. Like awareness is the key. That's what I
Hmm.
share as well. And you
Hmm.
definitely have given us a lot to think about today.
Hmm.
And I
Thank you.
know you have prepared a gift for those who want to take what we have been talking here to the next level and go deeper with you. So could you say a little bit more about the gift?
Well, a gift is some time with me. If you feel like you hear something that really resonates with you and you go, I need to um, explore this a little bit further. And if you want to explore it with a safe person, and that is, something that I can claim for myself. I'm a safe person. If you want to talk with me, you can just reach out to me at Carrie at lifesnextchaptercoaching.com and get on my calendar, and we'll have a conversation to see if it's not working with me, it's to talk about some resources and next steps for you. So, yeah, get on my calendar.
That is a beautiful gift and so helpful. So get on our calendar. I have the link below so you find the email easily. And now, do you have a final special message that you would like to leave the audience with?
Well, there's a practical tool and a tip that I'm going to leave you with. And if you find yourself in an emotional space or in overwhelmed, especially. Overwhelm is one of those emotions that can really take over when you're grieving. There's just like too many things all at once and you shut down. One of the ways that you can help regulate yourself and calm down your parasympathetic nervous system is through breathing. And I teach just a very simple breathing process where when you notice that, you take what we call 4 intentional breaths. And the first breath is as you're taking the breath, you're having the thought of uh, acknowledgement is the first breath. And it's like acknowledging there's a lot going on here. It's understandable that I'm feeling this way. And so that next breath is appreciating. So I appreciate myself because, it takes deep love to experience deep grief. And so I appreciate that I'm dealing with a lot and I'm doing the very best I know how to do. And the third breath is acceptance. So you're breathing in. I may not like what's going on right now, but I accept it. And then the fourth breath is allowing. And that fourth breath, because you've slowed your nervous system down a little bit, it's like a curious question of what what wants to happen in my life? What can I allow? What greater potential wants to come forward? So it's where I take the person through the breath. So we'll take that first breath of just acknowledge that everything that's going on, it's a lot. And then the second breath. And appreciate yourself. Appreciate the patterns that may be showing up. Maybe they serve you, maybe they don't. Third breath, accepting. I'm just accepting that this is present now. I may not like it, but it is what it is. And then that fourth breath, I'm making space to allow what wants to emerge that is for me to come forward. So it's those 4 breaths.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Carrie. I love that exercise. And I think this is now here. So you can go back again and again to do this with Carrie. So thank you, Carrie, for your time and wisdom today.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Katja, for this wonderful conversation.
And if you enjoyed this interview, please give it thumbs up and subscribe for more. And also check out the previous interviews too. I'm sending you loads of love and light.